buried here. This was, in fact, one of the ways in which they were able to get the ice out of Wenham Lake to the railroad system itself to be shipped into
That's correct.
Boston.
This was about I guess a 3/4 of a mile long spur track which came in from the main line and ended just beyond the view of this picture here on the right, and is already out of service at this point in the 1890s, because by this point they had bigger ice facilities down in North Beverly, where McDonald's is now. So this had been kind of given up down here. But the interesting thing about this particular spur was that it was engineered by a 19-year-old Grenville Dodge, who much later went on to become famous as one of the engineers who created the Union Pacific Railroad, the first transcontinental railroad in the country. And he's from Danvers, Massachusetts.
Wow.
And he actually laid out this spur track when he was only 19 years old as a surveyor.
That's something. Today, when we ride along Route 1A, can we not see the evidence of where the track
You
went?
sure can.
If we look behind
behind the golf course.
The Lakeview Golf Course there, right at the fifth, I think the fifth green.
Whatever that is, right
back.
next to the road, and you can look up and there's a path right up through the trees.
That was the
That's
old
the
spur
ice track route.
And the glory days of the Wenham Lake ice were very much involved here.
Indeed.
At this point. Okay. And we move on to a little bit further up Main Street. We're still in Wenham, and we are in front of Mr. Benjamin Conant's house here, Rich.
Right, and that probably explains why the picture's taken here, because he just had to run out on his front dooryard and take it. And again, this is the same project that we just looked at, only here we're up further, as you mentioned, on Main Street, and about a week or two later. But anyway, the same process is involved here. They are putting in fact, it looks like they've already put in the heavier rail for the coming of the electric cars in the changeover from horse cars.
You know, this picture is dated May 27, 1 week exactly later than the previous picture that we just saw.
This brings up an interesting point that I only just now thought of. Did they suspend service? They must have.
They had to.
For a length of time. They had to, because you couldn't be doing this and run cars over it of any kind, and the wires are not yet strung for the electrics overhead. So they must have actually had to suspend service or run some kind of omnibuses or something on the road while this was going on.
I'll bet that's what they probably did, was to have a busing service to take care of
with
their
wagons
clientele.
or something.
Wagons, omnibuses, whatever you might want to call them.
Because this wasn't done overnight. This had to have taken probably close to a month to complete this.
I'm sure with the manpower involved and the slow progress that you would make without the machinery that we could use today. I mean, this had to take weeks and weeks and weeks to do.
Especially stringing the wire overhead for the electric cars. Must have taken quite a while to put the poles in.
Interesting point. So this is in front of Mr. Conant's residence.
Right.
Now, we have here a builder's photo, Rich, coming up.
Yes, this is a really nice picture, which is typical of pictures that were taken of pieces of equipment, both streetcars and locomotives for the railroads and so forth, called builder's photographs, taken at the place where the cars or the equipment were constructed. And this picture shows the car of the Gloucester, Essex, and Beverly Street Railway Company named Essex. And this is a really ornate single truck enclosed car. And this was the type of car that was used at the turn of the century on many, many streetcar lines. And this line ran from, as the name suggests, from Beverly all the way down to Gloucester through Essex. And indeed, the gold spike was driven at Beverly on August 14th, 1895, right at Ellis Square.
Now, I believe there's something here that you might like to read a little bit to our audience.
Yeah, this picture, and of course this line, shows a route that was extended from the line that had gone from Salem through Beverly and on up to Hamilton and Wenham. And as I said, diverged and went on down to Gloucester through Essex. And this had been apparently in the works for some time. And just like today, there were delays, and it wasn't running when they said it was going to be. It was supposed to be running August 1st, and it wasn't. And so there was a local article in the Beverly Times, appropriately enough, and I quote just a little bit of it. Here it is August, and the electrics are not running. Grass is growing on their tracks, and there is no news to indicate what is being done. People all along the line are getting impatient for their first ride. but large bodies move slowly and all will be ready in good time. And that's a quote. And it said, finally at Ellis Square in Beverly, the completed track was ceremoniously joined to the rails of the Cabot Street, on Cabot Street of the Lynn and Boston Street Railway. And here again in the Beverly Times, in a report of August 15th, the day after the ceremony, we have this quote. After months of anticipation, the Gloucester, Essex, and Beverly Street Railway is finally a completed fact. The cars are not running yet, but will be next Tuesday, according to Mr. Willard Ferguson, the company president. Thanks to the mighty arm of Alderman Dearborn, the steel between the cities of Gloucester and Beverly is now complete. This was done yesterday afternoon in the presence of 250 people at Beverly. Alderman Dearborn was handed the golden spike and the hammer precisely at 2 p.m. by the foreman of the track gang, Mr. James J. Daly. On his first attempt, the alderman missed the spike, but his second try, 1, 2, 3, right on the head, and the spike was home. The ceremony ended with the alderman presenting the hammer to the Beverly Historical Society, represented by Mr. Augustus A. Galloop. And that's the end of the quote. The following Saturday found Superintendent Fitzsimmons and his crew of technicians testing the track and the overhead wire. Taking the controls of one of the new cars, Fitzsimmons drove over the newly completed track to Beverly. Reversing direction there, he returned to Essex and then on to Gloucester, checking each curve, switch, and signal light. Upon their return to the car barn at the Essex Falls without incident, Ferguson announced that on Monday, August 19th, would be opening day.
Huh. We're taping this here August 25th, 1992, so we're only a mere 97 years ago. We're
That's
talking
correct.
About, yeah.
That's right to the month. Yeah.
And this quotation, which was taken from a book which is entitled Essex Electrics by Sherman Mears, and we have some more material from it. Some of the pictures that we've just seen on the screen as you read that piece have come from this fine, fine booklet written by Sherman Mears.
Yes.
Moving along now, we're going down to Essex, Mass, Essex Falls, and this was the power station that I alluded to at the beginning here of our program. What about this, Rich?
This is an interior view taken from this fine book which you just showed, and this shows the interior of the Essex Falls power plant in 1895, and this was part of the Gloucester, Essex, and Beverly Street Railway. And there are 2 steam engines here with 100 pounds per square inch steam pressure, and they turned generators that powered the 600 volts to keep the cars running for the 25 years that this particular line ran. And at the rear of the photograph in the center are the regulating devices that balance the voltage and the line loads and protected the generators from overload damage.
My goodness. This was really at the beginning of this type of mechanical, mechanisms, and for its time, it was, I imagine, the state of the art, quite sophisticated.
Oh, it was indeed. I mean, this would be like nuclear power is today, and in some ways was just as much feared. People were positive that the electricity in the air was going to have deleterious effects to their health, and even then, people just were very upset about technology like this.
Right.
Running rampant.
Was there any danger to do you think, in your opinion, to people such as ourselves or anyone who might have been along the lines if those wires got tangled or came down?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you've got 600 volts of power, which if the wires came down in a storm or what have you, obviously if you touch the thing, you're going to get zapped.
That would get your attention.
Oh, it would get more than your attention. It would get you a spot down at the local bone orchard. But, yeah, I mean, there was some danger there, but I'm sure that didn't happen that often. And once the wire did come down, obviously the power was shut down immediately.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. But all of this being brand new technology, I'm sure they had to go by trial and error.
Oh, indeed.
And a lot of mistakes must have been made before they finally got the thing working the way they wanted it. Okay. Now, is this building still around today?
This is all part of the car barn and the shops that are down there at Essex Falls today, and for quite a number of years there was industrial cab company which was in that building, which made cabs for bulldozers and tractors, but they're gone, and there's a couple of other businesses in there today, but the buildings are still there.
Buildings are still there. We take our camera down there and get a shot of
Yep.
the building that we're looking at here, the interior.
Mhm.
And what would you say? This is 1895.
I would say this was taken probably at the time that it opened,
Yep.
yes.
Okay. Next up, another diagram, Rich, to talk about here.
Yeah, essentially this shows in a very clean and concise way how the power was supplied by the generator, which we just saw in the last picture, and traveled through the wires and the rails and so forth of the system and down through the trolley poles on each one of the cars, and then back through the rail and back to the power plant to complete the circuit. And again, you can see in a very simplified fashion here how the generator is connected to the regulating devices and the circuit breakers and that sort of thing, and then out through and into the trolley wire, which ran overhead on the poles alongside the road, and how each individual car had its own spring-loaded pole with a little wheel on the end, and that ran up against this copper wire, which was about 3/8 of an inch in diameter, and the power went down through this pole, which was called the trolley, and down into the motors, which were in the wheels of the car, and then back through the wheel itself onto the rail, and that completed the circuit.
Yeah, how would the car reverse itself now?
If you wanted to go the other way, you just changed the pole around and faced it in the other direction, and then the car would be switched into reverse and would go the other way.
I see.
It was simply a backward-forward switch on the control stand of each trolley car.
Yeah. Now we're looking here at this chart, which represents 17 miles, I believe,
That was the total length of that particular system from Beverly down to Gloucester.
from Ellis Square in
Right,
Beverly
right,
into Gloucester proper.
correct.
17 miles,
Right.
and all the power came right from this building.
From that building at that time, yes.
Isn't that something to think about? I mean, it wouldn't matter as long as everything was functioning right here in this building properly. The
That's right.
lines would go
That's right.
go smoothly. And what would happen, Rich, if some of the, as often did occur, some of the poles would come down? What would be the procedure? The car would go dead? at that
Everything
point?
would go dead as soon as the wire broke, and then they'd have to shut the power down and make repairs to it, much the way the power company does today when a line comes down.
So that, again, everything would have to go back here to this building.
That's correct.
Power shut down, and the motor man's out there. Sometimes, though, they try to get the pole back up on the wire, but there was
Right.
a lot of, how would you say, blue?
Oh, you'd get
blue sparks
You'd get
and
blue
smoke and-
sparks of a short circuit like you do in your house if something shorts out.
Yeah.
Sure.
But it could be done probably in a pinch to save the whole system from
Yep.
going down. And this was quite common to have these
Oh,
poles
indeed.
come down, right?
Indeed. I mean, they would be, struck by tree limbs and so forth and break the wires in a storm.
Yep.
Sure.
And this is 1890 technology here that
Yes.
we're looking at.
Yep. It's real Jules Verne type stuff.
Yep. Okay, next thought here. We have a picture that was taken over in Salem, Rich.
This is a Lynn and Boston car, in fact, number 578, approximately 590 Essex Street in Salem in 1895. And it's running on the line between Peabody and Beverly via Salem. And it's kind of nice because instead of concentrating on the car itself, it's kind of a nice scenic picture taken from the sidewalk in the winter. And it's almost a Christmas card looking view. And you can see that it's a closed car with open vestibule. So again, the motorman had to be right outside and taking the brunt of whatever the winter had to offer. And you have to really hand it to people in those days that could do a job like that and survive.
Right. We talked about the last program about why in heaven's name they didn't provide for the motorman. I mean, why did they leave the poor fellow out there in the middle of, no man's land, so to speak?
I think people were kind of considered expendable back then, if you will.
He certainly got a better view.
He worked there. He was getting paid. Why did he have to be comfortable? There was no need to make him comfortable, too. I mean, he was getting his 50 cents a day, however much they made.
Yep.
There's no reason why he had to be comfortable on top of it.
Yep. And these cars ran in all kinds of weather.
Oh, yes.
Only the severest of storms
Would stop them. That's
stop
correct.
them.
They would run back and forth during a storm just to keep the tracks open.
Yeah. And a lot of people, I'm told, would rely on those trolley tracks to navigate,
Sure.
using them as a guide to get, walking from one place to another
that's
during
right.
a big storm.
Because that was the only part of the road that was probably open.
They knew that the tracks would be kept open.
That's correct.
Did they have a snow plow on the front of the car? Or?
Not on the front of the cars per se, but they had special cars that had plows. They had double-ended plows. There would be a plow on each end of a car, and they were special cars built just for plowing. And they also later on had sweepers, snow sweepers, which were sort of like a freight car type of unit, which had a big round rotary brush, both front and rear, so they could go in either direction. And this thing was powered by an electric motor, and it had a hood over it so that the snow wouldn't go everywhere, but it would revolve like that and brush the snow, much like some of these little electric snow brooms that you can buy now that have the little fast revolving brush that shoots the snow up in the air. That's how those snow sweepers used to work on the trolley systems. But for the real heavy snow, they had a wedge plow that would actually push through it.
Take anything along right with it. People, animals, anything that had to be in the way.
Oh, indeed.
But they actually performed a dual service, actually, because they not only they kept their system going, but they provided access for people to, again, using that track to navigate to.
That's right. You could actually walk down this, and the only question comes to mind is if you're walking down this trench between two banks of snow and a trolley car comes along, where do you go?
You have to be on guard for sure. Yeah. And of course, the old-time way of plowing was to get a horse and a hitch with maybe some heavy logs or whatever on the front, heavy weight on the front, and just kind of sweep the snow aside.
Right. Sidewalk plows were done that way, and of course the